Hello, everyone. I'm Paula Lem with Poets and Quants, and welcome to our weekly podcast, Business Casual. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Caroline DRT Edwards and Maria Wickvilla. So Caroline, as you know, was head of admissions at INSEAD and is co-founder of Fortuna Admissions, and Maria is the founder of Applicant Lab. So last week, I was fully in summer vibes mode, and we talked about barbecues. And in the process, we learned that Maria is not a very good cook, or so she claims.
Well,
It's true. It's not just a claim. It's a fact. It's an axiom of the universe, in fact.
And Caroline, it seems, enjoys cooking.
I do.
Well, in the meantime, I actually saw on LinkedIn talk about a certain pavlova you'd whipped up, Caroline. And I think this must have been on my mind when I took myself to a patisserie on Friday for a little treat. So my icebreaker today is, where do you guys stand on making desserts? And what's your favorite to make or eat? So Caroline, pavlova?
Pavlova is a big favorite in our house. Yeah, my mum used to make it, and it's become a very popular affair, often for birthdays or for if we've got a crowd. It's an easy thing to make for a lot of people, I find. So yeah, that's one of our favorites. And I like sticky toffee pudding, lots of other things. How about you, Maria?
It will surprise no one that I am unable to cook dessert, but my favorite dessert to eat is île flottante, which is it's very hard to make. It's like a little meringue in a sea of delicious. It's a floating island of meringue. But my husband tried making it once, and it took him forever. And the little île, the little island in the middle, was kind of deflated. But it was. I admired his efforts so much, and so it was
That's
delicious.
very sweet.
It was the best dessert I've ever had.
And rising sea levels, so that's like...
That's right. It was the global warming version of the floating island dessert.
Melting iceberg.
That's right. How about you, Paula? Is it what's your pavlova or something else?
Oof. My favorite one to eat, I haven't been baking or making a lot of desserts recently, what with a tiny child, but my favorite dessert to eat at least used to be creme brulee. I'm not sure if that's changed recently, but I do still really like creme brulee.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So before we get to our main topic, I actually have a number of the week that I've pulled from one of our stories. So there's a bonus point if you can tell me where it comes from.
Uh-oh.
It's 470,000. Any takers? And if not,
to a UC, I don't know.
Good stab. So that actually is the 2025 Harvard Business School graduates' highest base salary after leaving HBS, which is also the highest reported salary of any graduate at any business school. So I just saw that and thought, that's pretty mad. I mean, we've talked about salaries before, and for your average person, a post-MBA salary from a top MBA program is nothing to sniffle at. I mean, we're talking like 160 to 180 grand. But 470,000 is quite a bit. So, Maria, what role in industry do you think this grad is going into?
I think this grad probably came from the private equity industry and was probably making somewhat close to that prior to enrolling in business school. And if I had to guess, they're returning to the private equity industry. Either that, or it may be some sort of a family business, perhaps, some sort of Saudi, an oil company somewhere. But that seems kind of like an outlier. So I would guess private equity going from and going back into.
Funny, the Saudi oil crossed my mind. Caroline, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think so. Someone in finance. I agree with Maria. So yeah, it's possible that those salaries are few and far between, at least coming straight out of business school.
Yeah, another tip for our applicants then, don't get your hopes up. At least for a few years. Right. So our main topic today. So we've talked before about the things that applicants can do to better understand where schools stand on AI in the classroom. But today we're devoting our episode to talking about the use of AI in admissions. So we've got a piece in Poets and Quants that Caroline actually has penned for us on this topic. So Caroline, I love this anecdote in the piece where you say that you heard from one admissions director that some candidates are actually deliberately putting typos or grammatical errors into their essays to disguise the use of AI.
Yeah.
That's just absurd.
It is kind of ridiculous. Yes. Yeah. People are trying to disguise the fact that they've largely used AI to generate their essays. The problem that candidates have is that admissions file readers read so many of these essays that they quickly pick up the patterns of AI writing, and that is very hard to disguise. So it's not fooling anybody. And then actually what we find increasingly in our work as coaches is that we are working with candidates to make sure that to sort of reintroduce their voice, because sometimes they come to us with drafted essays where they've used AI and it doesn't sound like them at all. So that's something that we work with candidates on, is getting them to actually have the courage to do the writing themselves again.
And Maria, I also want to ask you about this, but before we get into it, I should say, so schools obviously aren't one monolith. So some bar the use of AI entirely, and others want applicants to be very clear about where they've used it. So I've just got a quick taster of where they stand, which comes from a handy table in Caroline's piece. So at one end of the spectrum, we've got Stanford and Stern, which is being very stern on AI. Sorry, bad joke. And so Stanford, quoting from them, they say it's improper and a violation of terms of this application process to have another person or tool write your essays. Such behavior will result in the denial of your application or a revocation of your admission. Whereas Stern says your essays should be written entirely by you. An offer of admission will be revoked if you did not write your essays. And then we've got other schools that come down on this a little bit less strictly. So more of a gray area. So Harvard, for instance, says the use of AI is permitted. However, you shouldn't claim AI output as your own work. And then it gives you 75 words to explain how you've used generative AI. Yale, kind of similar. They advise applicants to employ AI only in ways that support, not compromise, the authenticity and originality of your submission. And they say AI content shouldn't be the primary source of your essay. So, Maria, that's a range. If AI is being used in most workplaces these days, you can see applicants might argue, well, they may as well use it in an admissions essay. So why should an essay be any different?
Because in the workplace, you're not trying to convey the essence of who you are as a human being. So if you're using AI to write a marketing report or some sort of analysis of a stock that you're thinking of investing in, that's fine because AI is good at those sorts of impersonal analyses. But most business school essays are really trying to get at the essence of who you are, where you've been, where you want to go, how do you lead, what matters to you, and all of these very often very personal topics. And so you shouldn't use a robot to write one of the more human writing exercises you've ever done. So on a fundamental level, the tool does not match what the task is. So it's one thing to use AI at work, but for this particular task, it's not the right thing to use. As Caroline mentioned also, it is very obvious to seasoned admissions readers when it's AI. For years, the parallel that I thought of was, for years as admissions consultants, we've been telling people, don't write your own letter of recommendation, because when you write your essays, you have a voice when you write. You might not realize it, especially if you're not an editor or a professional writer, but you have a voice. And so if you also write your letter of recommendation, it's pretty obvious sometimes through subtle turns of phrase, through how you punctuate, all sorts of ways give it away. It's the same thing with AI. You, as an applicant, you might have AI generate an essay and you think, well, this looks great, because you don't realize just how AI-ish it seems, because you're not reading thousands of these every year. And it's not your job to pick out the nuances. So it's a little bit sad sometimes, I think, when applicants think that they're getting away with it, and it's like, to them, that like they show it to like their friend, and their friend's like, this is great, and I'm like, yeah, but your friend doesn't know anything about this process. So anyway, and also
Yeah, I
AI
mean,
makes mistakes.
it does. That's also a fair point. So, Caroline, we've already seen a taster of these various responses that schools have to AI, but one thing I think you alluded to earlier, but I didn't really mention in those examples that I read out, is that third approach of schools using software to detect AI. How common is that? I mean, you looked at the top schools. I'm curious, beyond those, whether that's, commonly used by admissions. And then I wonder whether you've had conversations where you've seen how admissions officers handle this when, like a chunk of an essay, maybe not the whole thing, but some small portion looks like it's AI generated.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, a number of schools are saying that they may use AI screening tools. And something to keep in mind is that just because other schools aren't disclosing that doesn't mean that they aren't also using those tools. So I think it's just something candidates need to keep in mind, that any school could be using these tools. So I think some schools are being quite proactive in checking this, and some are not bothering as much. The issue, of course, is also that these tools aren't 100% accurate. So sometimes that they will screen an essay and pick it up as AI generated and it's not, or vice versa. So it's not perfect. As far as I know, they are not dinging people because it's picked up that there's AI generated content. I think that it just means that they will scrutinize the application and the candidate more closely if it's being picked up as having some AI generated content. So I think it's a warning signal to candidates that you're better off avoiding submitting AI generated content, because it's such, you're really shooting yourself in the foot if you submit something that is picked up either by a tool or by a human reader as probably AI generated. And it's just not worth the risk, right? As Maria said, it can be very useful in the workplace for generating a report or for an email, but this is a life-changing opportunity for you. And I just, it's not worth taking the risk of a silly shortcut that isn't doing yourself any favors.
I do
Well,
think that it is really harming people. At the AGAT conference, some admissions officers said that they've actually had people using them during the video interviews. You can tell, right? You ask the question and there's a momentary pause and their eyes dart off to another side of the screen, and then they come back and they answer the question. And so I think that that's the most foolish. I mean, you think you're fooling, you think you can fool us when you're using AI in writing. You definitely can't fool them when your eyes are darting to another side of the screen, or like you're quiet for a few seconds and then you suddenly emerge with a perfectly formed answer that does not sound like actual conversation. So I do think that in those situations, I mean, the admissions officers do not overtly say like, we rejected those people, but I think it's a safe bet that if you show up to the interview trying to use AI, it's probably not good. And I think Caroline was just touching upon, or started to touch upon this idea of like doing the work, like you're ultimately cheating yourself. I think if you let the AI do the work for you. It's just like if you never learned how to do mathematics, you're like, I'll just use a calculator. Like there is something fundamentally valuable. The schools don't ask you for these essay questions because they're sadists. And they just enjoy giving you busy work to do and a hoop to jump through for no reason. The hoops exist for a reason. Like the hoops are there to really make you think about, well, why am I doing this? When am I a strong leader? What aspects of my leadership or management need to be bolstered? What am I looking to get out of this process? And the act of going through that thought process is so valuable, because then if you do get in and you do enroll, you're going to be so much more focused once you get there. You're going to have that conviction that this is the right choice for you. And when you get to the program, you're going to be that much more efficient. You're not going to be flailing around like maybe marketing, maybe finance, maybe I don't even want to do this degree. And so that level of introspection has significant value. And so I think, let's say you're like, haha, I used AI and I got in and nobody detected me. I gamed the system. No, you didn't though. You played yourself. In the words of the prophet DJ Khaled, like you played yourself. So, I think even if you could get away with it, which I think is hard, I don't think you should do it. I think there's value to using your brain for this.
I have to say, Maria, you are absolutely channeling my high school English teachers in saying, you're cheating yourself by not writing this essay. Not that and meanwhile, high school me was like, why would I not want to write this essay? This sounds like so much fun. I love English class, but clearly not everyone does. So having talked about the potential risks in using AI, Caroline, there are a number of ways in which AI can help. How can you use it in a useful way?
Yeah. So I think it could be very useful for research, especially at the initial stages when you're looking to figure out which school might be the best fit for you, to cast a wider net. And that is great, because I think sometimes candidates default to a short list of schools that they're targeting, because they're the schools that they've heard about, or it's the schools where their colleagues have gone to business school, and don't look very far beyond that. So AI can be useful for perhaps uncovering some school options that you wouldn't have considered, right? If you're targeting, I don't know, real estate or healthcare, perhaps it will uncover some business schools with some great courses and electives that you wouldn't have otherwise found out about. So certainly at the research stage, although I wouldn't only use AI for the research. As we've said, it'll often make mistakes. And so it could be giving you some out-of-date information. There have even been cases of candidates who have cited courses and professors in their business school applications, and those courses no longer exist, or those professors are no longer teaching at the school, right? Because AI will often not, will be referencing out-of-date information. So always verify information that you actually put in your essays with the business school website itself. And I would not only use AI for your research, definitely look through the school websites. You'll also find that some information is gated. So for example, often careers reports are gated. So you have to provide your name and email address to be able to download the full report. And often LLMs are not able to access that information. So if they're giving you recruitment statistics, they're probably not pulling it straight from the school. They're pulling it from another third-party website, which may or may not be up to date. So you should definitely always verify information with the school website. Another way it can be useful is for brainstorming. So if you are figuring out different ways of presenting a part of your experience, then you can ask AI for 5 different ways to present this story and different angles. Of course, it will often make stuff up, so make sure that anything you actually put into your essay is not fabricated, that it's actually your story. And then sometimes one of the challenges that candidates have is that you'll typically have word count restrictions on the essays, and then other question fields in the application form. And sometimes it's quite challenging to fit what you want to say into a given word count. And so sometimes it can be useful, if you've got a particularly wordy sentence or paragraph, to ask it for suggestions for how to cut this down, how to get these 50 words into 40 words or whatever it may be. And it can have some good suggestions for trimming your language, which particularly for non-native English speakers, I think can be useful. These applications are pretty challenging for everybody. And if English is not your native language, then writing the essays and editing them is an additional hurdle. So it can definitely be useful for that trimming process. Just be careful that you do not. The problem sometimes with the AI editing is that it will take out some of the language that actually really makes it sound like you. And it will sort of smooth over the style and make it sound quite generic. So just be very careful about that, and that it doesn't kind of suck out your personality from the text.
So use it to trim, but not to rephrase and be wary of it taking your personality out.
Yes. Yeah, that's the risk.
Yeah. Any other ways in which you might use AI as an applicant, Maria?
Yeah, so Caroline hit all of the main points. I think particularly if you're going to use it to cut down from, say, 285 words to 250 words, don't just say, cut this down. But I ask it, what would you cut from this in order to get it to 250 words? What edits would you make? Give me a list of them. And then that way you can go through and say, this proposed edit, this doesn't sound like me, or yeah, it wants me to cut out this detail because AI doesn't think this detail is important, but actually this detail is exactly what shows that I am a great fit for Tuck. So those nuances, again, it helps you get the benefit, but it puts you more in control of what those edits are, as opposed to just handing it over to AI. But yeah, in terms of mistakes, definitely double check everything. I can't remember if I've told you guys this story yet or not, but my favorite example from the past year was someone who sent me a very clearly AI generated draft citing that they couldn't wait to go to Harvard Business School to study with acclaimed Professor Clayton Christensen, who unfortunately passed away 5 years ago. And I'm like, AI wrote your essay, and they're like, well, how'd you know? And I'm like, because this professor is forget not even, they are no longer teaching at the university, which absolutely happens, especially younger, adjunct faculty before they get tenure. They do tend to move from school to school. But even if they have tenure, sometimes they move from school to school. But, definitely make sure that the professors are alive before you reference them. That's my pro tip of the day.
Top
Minimum threshold.
There we go. I'm here to serve. I'm here to provide value.
So, Caroline, we at the beginning we talked about the different approaches by school, but I noticed that in your piece you also said that a number of top schools haven't published AI-specific admissions policies at time of writing. So those include MIT Sloan, Chicago Booth, and INSEAD. Does that surprise you at all? And how would you approach that lack of guidance as an applicant?
Well, it may just be that we didn't find their guidance. So I can't guarantee that they haven't published something, or perhaps they published it since we looked into the guidance and published the article. But I would just, essentially, I think most of the schools, what they're saying is, look, we understand that people are using AI and that you will be using it in your process at some point, but please do not submit material that is AI generated, right? It has to be your own work. So I'm sure that those other schools would have probably a similar perspective. So, and in most cases, candidates are applying to multiple schools. So it's no good assuming that, okay, well, INSEAD hasn't said anything, so they're clearly absolutely fine with me writing everything with AI and then copy pasting what you've written for INSEAD for Harvard or Kellogg. That's not going to work. So I would just assume that all of these schools might be screening for AI and that none of the schools want you to be submitting material that is AI generated. So just be conservative about your usage. As we said, you can use it for research, you can use it to help you with some trimming here and there, but don't outsource sort of wholesale essays to the tool, because schools are likely to pick up on it, whether you think that you've disguised it well or not. You probably haven't.
And if they don't pick up on it, in the unlikely case they don't pick up on it in the essay, if you're called in to do an interview, surely they would know then, right, that you haven't actually written something that you claim to have written.
Yeah, I mean, schools have always noticed discrepancies between how candidates write in their applications and how they communicate in other contexts. So whether it's on an interview or in a phone call or in an email exchange. So that's always been a potential issue that candidates face when they overproduce their written applications, but then it doesn't actually match up with their real communication skills. It's just that AI has accelerated that and made it easier to have an even bigger gap between how you normally communicate and how you can communicate with AI generation. And I didn't mention this in the article, but Maria brought it up that I think there is an increasing issue in interviews where candidates are trying to use AI tools. So I think it's getting increasingly difficult for schools to know who is the real candidate, right, underneath the written application and then behind the interview, if candidates are trying to game it with AI. But it also means that there's a premium on authenticity, because in some ways it's easier to stand out if a lot of candidates are submitting material that has been over edited or over generated by AI. Then if you're actually submitting something that is really human and authentic, then you can actually stand out more easily than you might have been able to 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, I have to say that example that you had for us before, Maria, about an applicant sort of looking off the screen and at an AI answer while answering a question to an interviewer is that just blows my mind. Like, that would make me another level of stress trying to figure out what AI is telling me and looking back at the interviewer.
Yeah, the subterfuge is more effort than just like preparing.
Thinking,
Like,
the
just
old-fashioned
think.
brain.
Yeah, just use this, and it's so much easier, and it's better. And what? I don't know, guys.
It's a brave new world. I think we'll end things there. Thank you so much, Maria and Caroline. Please come back next week. Well, you guys, please come back next week, because without you, there won't be a podcast. But also, to all of our listeners, please come back next week if you liked our discussion today. And check out poetsandquants.com. Thanks, everyone, again for listening.